Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is none of my normal co-hosts. They're all indisposed. Tom went to another continent and decided to tell me on yesterday that he was not here, and I didn't know that. And Tyler has some family things, but fortunately, we have a true hero here. And that is Mr. Paul Conti from Radio Free Hammer Hall. How you doing, Paul?
What's up, nerds? What's happening? Now, if you can't have Tyler or Tom here, I am basically the next best thing, considering that once Tyler was your temporary co-host for a little while, it took him literally about 3 months to eclipse my appearance count. So
That's true. You've been on the show many times. You're a full on regular. It's no problem. You're the sort of Steve Martin, I suppose, of this show, right?
I got a jacket in the back.
Absolutely. So, I'll some year at some convention I'll have to get out I'll have to make some custom jackets for like the 10 timers club or something like that for the people who've been on the show that often. At any rate, tonight we're going to be discussing future AOS armies, strapping on the tinfoil hats and imagining what we might see and talking about why we might see them. But of course, first off, we've got some news. I'm going to be handling that tonight. So let's talk about it. We don't have much.
Yeah.
We got this rumor engine thing. It's a bone scully thing with a rock in it. That's what it is. It looks like a weapon. It's clearly some kind of weapon. It's clearly an AOS thing, hopefully, or one of the associated AOS products. Warcry, Underworlds. What's your feeling here?
My guess is, or at least my hope is, new Man Crusher Gargant sculpt. It looks like about the right scale and style for that to me.
I had never thought of it, Paul, but boy, do you just captivate my dreams with that. Don't we all dream the dream that we would get a new man? Now, I've converted all of mine, obviously, and turned them into horrible, Frankensteinian machine people. But nonetheless, that is quite a dream. I'm going to go ahead and just back your play. I agree with you. I think that's exactly what it is. I'm here for it. God, that sculpt is old, and that's going to be a lot of what we talk about tonight. So there's going to be a portion of, old sculpts and how that influences our thought about new potential armies. Okay.
Although, I have to say though, although the sculpt itself is old and crappy, that box is such a beautiful treasure trove of cool bits.
I completely agree. No, you're absolutely right there. It's a tragedy, right? Because I wish they made boxes like that still. When you get the giant box, there's so many different ways to build it. I guess to some extent, the big giant box is the same way, the Mega Gargant box, because you just have so many different builds, so many different options. It's just really cool. Like they just gave you a ton of weird crap. Bring back weird crap in boxes. That's what I say. More weird crap in the boxes. Okay. We got one more little news item, and then Paul, you have one.
Yes.
So here's this guy, our ogre with a thing on his back, with a human in it with a gun. Another little Cities of Sigmar Dawnbringer Crusades preview. What did you think of this dude?
Well, I have a little all over the place on all of this new Cities of Sigmar stuff.
Okay.
Number one, I think the models look really cool. They're beautiful models. Awesome. I think they would, for me personally, I think they would be a nightmare to paint because they have an insane amount of detail on them.
Sure.
And I'm also a little bit mixed on it because the more that we see from this new release, the more I'm like, man, are they just going to can the entire Cities of Sigmar line?
Yes.
And just be this now?
Yes.
That's really what I think is going to happen, is pretty much everything's going to be gone.
Yeah, I have, by the way, that's not any inside information or anything. I don't know anything. I'm just saying, absolutely. As well, it should be. My guess is we'll probably keep some of the ancillary other stuff. What I mean there is the dwarves and dark elves and stuff like that, because they won't redo the this is my thought process. They won't redo the dark elves until they have a Malarian army, which we'll talk about that later on as well. But I think everything sort of pseudo-human, human-related, city-related, yeah, that's all getting completely redone. Maybe some dwarf stuff too. I don't know. I love this guy. Let me tell you why I love this guy. Do you remember the
It's a
like?
great mod.
It is. Do you remember the like? What was he called? Like the something breaker rat ogre. In eighth edition Skaven, you had a rat ogre with a palisade thing on his back and a claw lord in it. Love that. Love the idea of small humanoid riding on a big humanoid. Great. A plus. More of that.
The Cruel Boys one is cool,
Yep.
apart from being Cruel Boys.
Well, I mean, it's a great model. Yes, I agree that the Sludge Raker. No, he's not the Sludge Raker. That's the troll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he's great. He's great. Um, so I say more of that type of design. A lot of people were like, "Oh, this isn't a chonky ogre. Like this dude's, svelte." And to me, that's correct. That's exactly right. This dude's been he's been eating lean because he's living in the cities, living that city life. This is a great harken back to like the mercenary ogre type of thing of old.
And the Blood Bowl team too.
Yep.
Their big guy is an ogre.
Yeah, I mean, look, back in the day, if you go pick up the Empire, like fourth and fifth edition book, both had this. I don't have it right in front of me, so I apologize if I'm misremembering the exact edition. 92 or 96. Um, ogres was a choice in that book. Like you could take friendly ogres. That was a unit choice you had in the Empire. So like Imperial ogres is not like some weird new concept. This goes as far back as basically the lore exists, right? So I'm thrilled to see stuff like this coming back. I absolutely, man. If you live in a city and you got money and that people will take money or food to fight for you, like yeah, let's bring them all in. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Absolutely.
so yeah, it's pretty cool. I just hope that the fig. I hope the guy on top is some separate piece from the ogre, because otherwise
Yeah.
that's gonna be really really annoying.
Yeah.
So
It'd be really hard to paint.
yeah, exactly. All right, cool. But yeah, good stuff. I mean, look forward to seeing more city stuff. Probably not too long now, honestly. I would imagine we'll, based on what they said, I would have to imagine that this is a July release, but I guess time will tell. Paul, you had a news item you wanted to share with everybody.
Yes. So I'm actually repping the shirt at the moment. Um, so I am on the board for Du Bois GT. It's in Rochester, New York, in uh, November. It's like yeah, like mid-November. Exact week shifts around from year to year. But this year, I am working on currently getting all of the rules and design and everything together for a narrative event there. Um, what we're doing is, at that particular venue, for anybody that's been there before, you're probably aware there's kind of a space issue there, and like we can't get as much into the space as we really would like to. Um, so for the meantime, before we can, figure out maybe a bigger venue or something in the future, what we're doing is we're taking our usual Friday doubles event that is very common amongst a lot of GTs, and we're going to go and make that a narrative-oriented doubles event, drawing on some ideas from a variety of other events and putting it all together with some of our own flair. Going to do take some inspiration from our man Steve Herner doing the holy events, having the battle plans basically like being the tables and having cool stuff and cool rules and kind of be immersive in the table. And the thing that I was actually working on like last night was we're going to be using Anvil of Apotheosis basically for like a champion for your army. So I'm working on making some modifications and additions to those rules so that we have something a little bit more interesting and fun than just what usual Anvil of Apotheosis is. And then after it goes, if it goes well this year, maybe do the same next year, but definitely doing something with it going forward, and hopefully eventually expanding this out to not just be a one-day side event at a GT, having it be a um, bigger scale narrative event that's like a multi-day thing.
Love it. Fantastic. Check it out. I'll link it down below. And what a great segue, by the by, into our pick of the week. So, Paul, what do you want to share with everybody?
So there is a relatively new channel that popped up recently that I've been really enjoying his stuff a lot. The channel's called Jordan Sorcery. He's been doing a lot of videos on like Warhammer history. He's not really doing like gaming content or even so much like lore content. It's really just like he did a series that was like going through every edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles and like where the stuff came from, who was involved in it, what were the changes, what kind of things inspired it, what was going on behind the scenes, really cool, fun stuff.
Nice. I love that. I love that kind of behind the scenes or like just general history stuff. That's really good. Okay, cool. I'll have to check that out. My shout out is going to be to friend of the channel Trevarian, a great guy who has a nice video. He's painting up a space marine, but but he talks about sort of the need not to like not layer or sorry, not blending, basically just using layers and how you can use it to get incredible results, and using different techniques of application like stippling and things like that. So you can check that out, linked down below. Just good advice for all over painting, by the way. Like, he happens to be doing it on a space marine, but there's important lessons there about, frankly, painting anything. All right, very good. Well then, Paul, let's talk about some hobby time. So hobby time, Paul. Uh, you been painting anything? What have you been doing? What's been on your desk, buddy? I mean, you're working on this thing. I imagine that's taking up a lot of time.
Yep, I'm also working on a terrain and table project to just run like backyard events at my house. Doing like last summer I did like a mega battle and barbecue thing. This year is going to be more of like an RTT sort of thing. Um, Building table toppers and putting terrain together. Just picked up a whole bunch over this past weekend. And then in addition to that, as always, I haven't been playing as many games lately. Over the past probably like year and a half or so, I really haven't been playing that much. I have been painting almost every day.
Okay.
And I've just done a ton of work on stuff. And with this, I want to throw a little challenge out there just to see, because at this point, I don't really care if I have the biggest collection. I think I might, and it would just be kind of a cool little crown to have. So where I'm at here, for my Maggotkin of Nurgle, I've got the entire range that is
Sure.
currently
Of course.
available.
Sure.
And my total of stuff that is painted is just over 14,000 points.
Pretty good.
I've got my Slaves to Darkness that is also all Nurgle marked, all in the same paint scheme. That's another about 8,000 points.
Okay. Okay.
And then I also have a whole bunch of Skaven Pestilence. That's another few thousand points. So I think the total comes out to about like 24, 25,000 points of Nurgle stuff.
That's
So,
quite a bit of dedication. The grandfather would be very pleased.
and it's a lot of yellow. It's an awful lot of yellow. And if I had known what yellow was going to be like to paint before I really got going on this and committed to it, I probably would have picked a different paint scheme. Yellow is terrible. But yeah, it's been a lot of yellows, a lot of greens, a lot of purples. And it's been really fun. I still have more to go. Like, I'm really digging Slaves to Darkness stuff. Keep expanding that and learning some new techniques and things to keep leveling stuff up. I've got a couple of little projects here and there too that I want to do. I really want to enter stuff in Capital Palette this year at Nova. So I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on for that too. Um, yeah, man, I'm wrecking that gray.
I love it. That's fantastic, dude. That's great. 25,000 points of basically Nurgle, because all in. You could put all those into a single army. Like, that is valid with that kind of, with the point structure you've got there. That all can go into a force. So, completely legal to claim that all as one army. It's pretty solid. It's pretty solid, no doubt about it. That's a lot. And something to be proud of. I mean, if you've got a thing you love that much, hey, I say go for it. For myself, lots of different hobby things going on. First of all, I expanded my paint racks. Obviously, you can't see them. They're here. I just hung up another one on the wall today. I've got 2 more shelf type things. So many, because I've got a bunch of paints that I needed to find a home for. So now I have a total of 5 complete of the like large nail polish racks, and then 5 stand-up ones, 4 smaller ones, and then 6 of the single shelf ones. So there's something, like, I haven't retotaled it, but there's something like 1,300 paints around me at any given point in time. Okay.
Nice.
Sometime this strange addiction will end. But of course, it hasn't just been that. I've also been putting those paints to use. And specifically, this has been sort of a week in the lab. So I've been working on some little Tau boys here. This guy's a little crisis suit guy. And it probably doesn't show up super well, but you can probably see all those little pink lines in the black. And so what I'm playing with and I'm putting together a video for is basically what is the best way to do this sort of, he shows up a little better, he's a little brighter, that one. What is the best way to do that sort of neon Tron panel lining, right? And so I experimented with a bunch of different mixtures of things to figure out like what made it work the best. How do you get, because the strange comment, it's a lot easier when you're trying to do like sort of a traditional recess shading. Like if you're just trying to drop black into a recess line, like that's not hard. There's a million products to do that. There's panel liners and oil washes and a million different things, right? It's not hard. But when you're trying to get like an ultra bright color amidst something dark, it actually is a lot more challenging. And so I wanted to know what was the way we could sort of navigate that. And I tried out 3 different mixtures, I guess, of different weird things. And I think I came to one I really like. So the 3rd time was a charm. And that's actually this guy. He came out like the absolute brightest. And yeah, so pretty cool, I think. That'll be a video probably next month sometime. So, but yeah, I've got many little Tau boys here because they're all my little experiments. So many of the little crisis suits and stuff like that. Getting together a nice little force of Tau for 10th edition. I'm just waiting on a new AOS army to grab me. I have too many of them now. That's the problem. I have to expand into other games. All right.
What you're going to do is you're going to take a Tau army, paint them all with like New Balance sneakers, cargo shorts, and like driving Lamborghinis so you can have your midlife crisis suits.
Yeah, indeed. Sure, absolutely. I mean, they are pretty sweet robots, and I do love robots. So, you know, I'm sure I'll eventually just get more and more of those little guys. All right. Let's move on to our main topic for the day, which is new armies for AOS 4.0. Okay, let's talk about the history of this very quickly here, Paul. Let's talk about new armies in general. I went back and had a glance before I put this together at what's new. So I'm going to quiz you, Paul. You didn't know this was coming, but here we go. Real-time quiz. What are the new armies that were introduced in AOS, and when, broadly defined, I don't need like year or month, just like when edition-wise, were they introduced? Let's see, Paul. How many can you get?
So what are we counting as being new armies? Are we talking about like total new model line launches?
For this, let's talk completely new force. Okay, like if they used one sculpt to build off of it, like one sculpt worked its way in, that still counts. Okay, but a redesign would not.
Okay. So obviously the first one was Stormcast Eternals in first edition.
There we go. Good. Yep, absolutely. Cut from whole cloth, defines the entire game. The Golden Boys of Sigmar himself, the Thunder Warriors from Aesir. Yes, of course.
You might think that Khorne Bloodbound were. However, a bunch of that stuff was actually from End Times,
Yep.
like the Wrathmongers and all those guys. So I would say that that was actually just a continuation of something that already existed.
I agree with
Um,
this.
then we got the Everchosen release with Archaon, Varangard, and Gaunt Summoner. That was, at least at the time, its own book.
It was, but that was also from End Times, because all those do like there's a mix of stuff there. But okay.
Those were all new sculpts for AOS, though.
Uh,
Yeah.
the way that the book was put together, like the Gaunt Summoner had been released earlier, so I guess we can count it. There's only like
Oh,
three
really?
models. I'm not going to count it as a whole army. So, but yes, okay, fair enough.
And then on the heels of that, Fire Slayers.
Yep,
They were like the first, like one of the first really big, trying to make a big deal out of it releases, and that has fallen pretty flat over time.
sure.
Let's think through here.
You're doing great so far.
Yeah. What else was first edition?
There's what there's
Um,
there's another big one. It came out very soon after this
oh,
year.
Iron Jaws.
There it
Iron
is.
Jaws.
There it
Yeah.
is. You got it. Absolutely. Yep. You got Iron Jaws, and then you have one that like we could sort of count or sort of not. Like again, it absorbed a decent amount of figures, but it had a lot of net new, and that's
Hmm.
Sylvaneth. So I wouldn't have hit you if you didn't count them, because obviously we brought over all the Tree Lords and everything like that. But we also
The
got
Dryad,
and
the Lords.
Dryads, yeah. But we got a lot of like new sculpts too at the same
Yeah.
time. Okay, good, good. Yes, absolutely. And then later on, we have one more in the 1.0 time frame, and it was the one that shook everything up the most, because not only was it very different, but a it also then necessitated a general's handbook rewrite, okay, in the middle to change a war scroll that caused the most outrage in the history of sort of outrage.
That would be Caradron Overlords.
There you go. That's right. Now, then we breach into 2.0 with Idneth Deepkin, right?
Right.
So now,
Hmm?
again, technically, I think it was like basically a tail end 1.0, beginning of 2.0 book. It came out right on the breach there, effectively. Um, but so that was a net new force. Like we had so many new forces as we defined this world, right?
Right.
Okay. Then we get to 2.0. So, formal 2.0. Can you think of I'll tell you right now, there are basically two net new armies in 2.0.
Well, definitely OBR, but that was
Yep,
later on. Um,
correct. OBR.
I feel like we could almost say Nighthaunt because that it had a lot of new sculpts in it. But then again, there was a lot of old stuff in there too.
Yeah, I put
So
that one to the side because it broke our rules for too many things. I'm allowing like one sculpt to come in for net new, but given there was a lot of new stuff there, to me, Nighthaunt was like a Sylvaneth type of thing, right? Where it was like it's an expansion of a concept.
Lumineth
There you go. There you go. Yep,
is the big one.
Lumineth. And so I mean we could also include Nighthawk if we wanted. Like we could call it 2.5 or 2 3/4 or something like that, right? I would be okay with that. And then there's one more that I wouldn't have formally busted you because only one sculpt came over, but the line only
It's one
has
of two.
yeah, exactly. But the line
Understand
only
that?
has like two model kits total. So
Yeah.
yes, and that's obviously Sons of Bahamut, right? So when we got our giants. Okay. So that was again, let's call it, I don't know how you want to call it. Again, two total sort of net new, two that were kind of expansions, build outs, redesigns. I don't know, however you want to think about it, right? That sort of thing. Yeah. And then obviously, then we get to 3.0. And Paul, what's been going on in 3.0, buddy? We're 2 years into this here. And
Well, we started off with Cruel Boys, which is like effectively its own army, but
sure, we'll
technically
count
another
that. We'll
book.
count Cruel Boys. Yeah,
Cruel Boys. Um, what else have we gotten relatively recently?
that's the end of the list, my dog. That's it.
Yeah, like we've had a lot of big line like redesigns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's been no shortage of new models or anything like that. It's
Sure.
just we haven't gotten anything really like entirely new army in quite a while.
Yep. Dan said, how many old kits was Doc? Well, actually, quite a few, just because of the nature of what it was. Now, I love Doc. Doc had a lot of new things as well, but it was more like a Sylvaneth situation, because you got Witch Elves and Sisters both came over. You've got both the Cauldrons. You've got all the heroes, so that is to say, all the non-Melusai heroes, right? So you had the Hag Queen, the Slaughter Queen on Cauldron, Hag Queen on Cauldron, all of which are built out of like one kit, right?
Yeah.
And then net new, obviously, you've got the Melusai, the Caneri, and oh, sorry, you also had the Dark Riders or whatever come over, those guys, the Doomfire Warlocks.
Easy to forget because nobody plays them.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course you've got the Snake people, the Bat people, and Marathi herself, who were the sort of net new kids. Yes, Ramian, we did mention Idneth. They were sort of the breaching line between 1.0 or 2.0. I would have counted them in either, frankly, because they were like right on that release bubble. So 3.0 so far, haven't seen a lot. As you said, this edition's been more about redesigns, right? Like we got the completely refreshed Seraphon. We're gonna get the completely refreshed Cities of Sigmar, right? So
we got Soul Blight had a huge relaunch of a lot of their models.
absolutely, right? New zombies, new skeletons, lots of new models infused into the line. Yeah, huge through pseudo oops. Curse City doesn't work. I guess this all just becomes Soul Blight normal book stuff. But yeah, sure, absolutely. S2D had a bunch of kits redesigned, new Demon Prince, new Chosen, right? So like, we've seen a lot of redesigns in this edition. But
we keep getting the obligatory periodic Stormcast Chamber.
Of course, yes. Every time we always manage to get some new Stormcast Chamber. That's exactly right. So we've got a history here of sort of 3 different things going on. Maybe 4. I don't know. 1, net new. Just like cut from whole cloth. Where were they before? Who knows? They were around. Now they're here. Right? We have expansion, sometimes built literally from a single model. Right? Fire Slayers, you could argue Iron Jaws, built out of Ardboys, stuff like that. Sometimes built out of more. Sylvaneth, Nighthaunt, right? And then you have this other category that is just redesign / addition, right? Like we're going to resculpt, redesign, update, refresh. Excuse me. Okay. So those are kind of our 3 categories. We're going to use that as the springboard for this. So I want to start by asking a basic question before we get into the armies themselves. Do you think, have we reached maximum army saturation? Can we still have, like we got 24, 25 armies.
Yeah. I think it's actually, if you count everything in Maw Tribes is separate, I think it's 27.
Yeah, which I don't, but okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah. If you're one book, you're one book. I'm even counting all the orc stuff as one. But sure, I get what you mean. So have we reached the end of the road? Like, should we cue the boys to men? Because there's no more room. The mortal realms are full. No new armies.
I think they have to be careful at this point because there's just a lot out there already. I think they're going to do it less frequently than what we have gotten previously. But on the flip side of that, I think they're going to put a lot of effort into what they do release so that it's very successful, especially compared to the early releases that were not so successful.
Yeah, sure. Nobody wants to repeat Fire Slayers, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. Let's not dance around this. Like, Fire Slayers, there are people who love them, but like they have been a failure as an army. When you look at their meta percentage over time, I've never seen sales numbers, obviously, but like you just look at their meta representation, it's always been trash, right? Like, how you go to a tournament, you go to any get together, you see like a Fire Slayer player, right? Like two in a tournament. It's if you're lucky. Okay. So, and I agree with Babuzek, who said a ton of armies need a second wave. Sure, I'd love expansions, but I think that will come. Like that's not. We're leaving that out of the discussion because I think they've shown they're kind of willing to do that along in the course of a normal release. Gitz is a good example of that in 3.0, right? Where it was like Gitz had a lot of models already. Like net new, they didn't even add that many kits when you compare to how many scrolls they had, right? But they got a bunch of new stuff nonetheless. That was just in the course of their normal book release. And I think we'll still see that kind of crap happen. Sometimes it'll be a new hero. Sometimes it'll be like, here's a new hero and a new infantry unit and a new kit and, whatever, right? Okay. Cool. I agree. I don't think that the ship is full, but I think they do need to be careful. That's why I think we're gonna do it like this, Paul. We're gonna assume that for 4.0, basically we get one net new army and one redesign. Now, hopefully we get more than that. Okay? But we're going to assume that, and we're going to make our picks out of our list plus what the audience comes up with as to what we think should be the one. Who's getting the golden ticket? Okay? Yeah. All right. Okay. So. Oops. All right, let's start with the obvious ones. I found this picture when I just Googled the word obvious. It's a lot of fun. It's a wet floor sign on the bottom of the ocean. I thought that was fun. Okay. Horrible. This is where this is where we get the high quality presentations that I put together. Google. You may have heard of it. It's an up and coming company. All right. Little known. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Let's start about the obvious ones. These are things that we've gotten lots of hints toward, right? That like we know there are leaders who are around. We might have gotten like actual pseudo models for this army in other armies, right? So Malarian's elves or the Umbraneth or whatever we're going to call them, right? We know that these folks right here are basically a representative of that army. We know Malarian's around. He shows up in a ton of the stories, talking to his mom, right? They have a really weird, uncomfortable tension in all of their narratives. And so, what about these elves? Paul, what do you think about Malarian's elves, the Umbraneth? What's your odds if you're a betting man?
I mean, I think. Let me try and do this from like GW financial math situation.
Sure.
Lumineth, really popular, really successful. Daughters of Cain, really popular, really successful.
Okay.
Following so that to me equals another cool dark elfish line that has some of like the maybe gameplay kind of elements taking off of what's going on with Lumineth. Seems like that would be a pretty likely one to me. That seems like that would print money.
All the emo darkness, but with all of the high elf sculpting they love to do. Yeah. I agree. This one feels fairly likely to me. I would also put the odds on this because we've gotten some clues that we're going to be going to the Realm of Shadow in the next edition, right?
Should be awesome because that sounds like that would have so much stuff that you could pull out for cool rules and cool battle packs and yeah.
Yeah, I mean we know we're living one realm per edition, right? We started in Akshi, then we went to Gairan, now we're in Gur, right? And so next up Shadow. Okay, fine, right? Or Fire Beasts. Fire Life Beasts Shadow. There you go. That would be the appropriate way to say that. Um, would they pull the existing range out from COS? Greasy Panham, first of all, excellent name. Secondly, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Yeah, like they could always leave that and say like that's there and that's just gonna stay in cities. Or they could always extract the force back out. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
My prediction is that it is going to be pulled out of cities. Like I think almost the entire model line of cities is going to be tossed, and it's just going to be basically humans and miscellaneous other stuff going forward.
Okay. My money's for them to keep the dark elves in cities for now until these guys release, and then I think they'll make a decision about whether or not those troops just kind of like migrate, or could they be in both forces? You know, because Malarian's always looking to play both sides, as it were. I don't know, but these guys to me feel like the odds-on favorite. Like if I was a betting man and you said let's place the safest bet possible, right? I would pick these guys. Feels like it aligns with the realm, aligns with figs we've already seen, with a character that we know is relevant and active and stuff like that. And that we've been hinting around at for a long, 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 long time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. How should these, like, if we do this, what do you want to see, Paul? What do you want to see in Malarian's Elves? Like, what's this release look like in your mind?
I would really love for them to just really lean into the whole shadow thing. I think, yeah, the image that you have up there, like that aesthetic, would be amazing to have a whole army of that.
Sure.
And I think, mechanically, I would really love to see them work off of like, the mists, the shadows, not being able to see them, have a lot of shenanigans with like hiding in terrain and popping off the edge of the board and teleporting around. Um, yeah, like maybe like assassins and stuff like that. Maybe make some good actual assassins.
Yeah, some good foot assassins. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. I'll tell you right now, I would love it if I think this could be an army that doesn't really have any huge centerpieces other than Malarian himself, who should be on like a shadow dragon or turn into a shadow dragon or something like that. Most of this could just be assassin type elves, like I would love it if this had like a high power per square inch kind of elitish army. I agree with you completely on the jumping in and out of shadows, like using a lot of terrain interaction. I think would be really cool. Also, another thing they could play with if we're talking about thematic elements is, remember, Malarian runs the gladiatorial arena on Space Station Sigmar. That was his gift to Sigmar, was this giant gladiatorial arena, and a lot of his troops fight and train in there constantly. So we could have some real sweet gladiatorial type elves too, right? Like some cool, like take the classic sort of Roman gladiator look, right? And AOS it up, nets and tridents and crap like that. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool different. There were different like fighting styles in the old Roman gladiator arenas, like that also went with like costume aesthetics and things like that. So I think there'd be a lot there that they could really pull out of and have some cool callbacks to real life stuff to inspire things and put, the natural AOS twist on it.
Yep.
Really cool.
Yep. The only thing I don't want to see is please don't model all of these models with smoke on them. I hate modeled smoke. Please stop with the modeled smoke.
Yeah.
Stop making me paint air. I don't want to paint air.
I don't care if it's spicy air. It's still air.
Exactly. It's still air. Yes, thank you. Spicy air is a great way to put that. But yes, no spicy air, please. And yeah, Mr. Lee Mechshop said Shadow Knights, 100%. I'm down for that. Give me some ghostly shadow horses. Yes. Yeah, I'm in for that. And yes, Hades, I'm not saying the army. I'm saying like a unit. Yeah, sure. You have like the trained gladiator unit that came out of that thing, right? That he can recall. So, seems cool. You got like some assassins, some people who want to fight stealth. You got some people who want to hit hard and go straight forward. Be a nice little kind of an interesting multi-path army you could follow, which would suit to the sort of dual nature of Malarian himself. He's always like, again, he's like the classic plays all the angles guy in the stories like that. He's always like helping, but also spying, but also working against. Like he's covering all his bets. So yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Ba-boom. Next up, Chaos Dwarves. Okay. Okay, Paul. Again, we had the Horns of Hashut, the weird human guys with the silly hats in that initial Warcry box. They looked dumb. They were bad.
Mm-hmm.
I like that failure alone might have just sealed the fate of Chaos Dwarves because those look so bad. And everybody was like, no, we don't like it. Do not want. So
Also, I think that might have also been people being mad that they saw the spoiler page that was floating around that said Horns of Hashut, and everybody was like, we're getting a Chaos Dwarf warband.
Yeah.
And then it was definitely not Chaos Dwarves, and I think everybody was mad.
Yep. Yeah. Totally mind-boggling, right? That whole situation. As to like why you would create the Horns of Hashut and then make them a human warband. It's so weird. But of all the mysterious choices they've made, that's high up there.
It is.
So Chaos Dwarves obviously have a long and storied pedigree in Warhammer, right? They've been around for a while. It's way back in the day, early editions. When the whole concept was just take a good thing and staple chaos on front of it. But they have a neat look. Yeah, no, nothing wrong with that. That's a lot of Warhammer IP. Let's be honest. Okay. But like, you know, they've got this long storied pedigree. They have some neat units. There's a lot to draw on there that you could imagine them being really excited to redo, to make new versions of those models. The war machines being a huge part of it, but not the only part of it. You know, their little centaur dudes and stuff would also be really fun to redo, like all that kind of stuff. They're also a very sort of industrial, technical, to be frank, shooty race in Chaos, or shooty faction in Chaos, which is unusual. Obviously, only the Skaven kind of match that, right? So they have a little bit of an interesting play style, and they've been mentioned in the lore. Like they show up in a lot of the books. They do get mentioned as like they're out there. They occupy the forges and stuff in the 8 points. Like it's they've been talked about. So it's not as though this is some unknown quantity, right? So what's your odds on these guys? What do you think? What do you think of Chaos Dwarves in general, Paul?
I think they're cool. I think it's a cool idea. I think part of the problem that we would run into is that if we kind of stick with the concept of what Chaos Dwarves have been in the past, it feels very much like it would just be chaosed up Caradron overlords.
Yeah, sure.
And it makes me wonder if they would be able to really produce enough of a unique aesthetic and theme to have it just not feel like KO with spikes and skulls.
Sure.
And maybe some funny hats.
Sure.
You know, I think that is kind of part of the problem there. You know, obviously we have the overt reference to Hashut, who was the god that the Chaos Dwarves were worshipping. Has it been mentioned in the lore whether they're still all about Hashut, or are they just kind of chaosy? Or
I don't think it's specifically mentioned their fervent worship of Hashut or anything. But I mean, you know, obviously Hashut himself
that's a Tom question because
is dead.
He loves Hashut.
Like that guy doesn't exist anymore. But sure.
Yeah.
But they can always just reflavor it as like you know, like that's Korn's personality to them or something like that, right? Like so that's fine.
Yeah. I think, will we get chaos dwarf models of some type at some point in the future? I think so.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to get an independent army of them. Might we get, a Warcry warband or two that gets stapled onto Slaves to Darkness, or maybe something else if they make it make sense? Then sure. Uh, but I see the odds of a full army of that. I think is pretty low.
Okay. Okay. So you've got lower odds on this one. I think this one's I would tend to agree with you. I see this as less than 50-50 in 4.0,
Yeah.
but it also wouldn't surprise me if it happened. Right? Like
Mhm.
they have dropped enough they've dropped enough hints. They've dropped enough little mentions. We saw this, the humans. They talked about them in the narrative. If it were to come out, I think it could be a very successful range. And I don't think it has to be like just Kharadron overlords, but evil or something like that. By the way, spikes, skulls, and funny hats could literally just be the subtitle of Warhammer in general, right? Like it could just be like Warhammer, spikes, skulls, and funny hats. Check it out. Play it now. Um, but I think these guys could absolutely still work just because they do have like the weird monsters. They do have the demons that are pressed into service with them. So that opens up a lot of space to do a lot of interesting things with the sculpts. And, yes, there is some similarity there between their quote unquote vehicles and the KO's vehicles. But big giant cannons or hell trains or stuff like that. Like you can split that up separate enough and not make it feel like it has to be the frigate or an ironclad or something like that. And the way you do that is you just make them more firmly artillery that just kind of chugs around and isn't meant to be like up transports, taking up being the sort of focal point of how the army operates as far as in terms of mobility, right? Um,
Mhm.
so like I think there is enough room here for these guys in the narrative, in the lore, in the model range. Um, and I you know I think this would be just a really fun addition. To me, if they were going to do this, they'd make a real big deal out of it. Okay. What I mean by that is like this would launch like the Sisters of Battle launched, right? Where it'd have like its gift box is what it would start with, and yada yada yada. This big this sort of like, I don't mean they do the year-long design process build up. Maybe not, but I mean, like, they would launch this with that kind of a situation because it would be another, like, return to a thing that you all keep saying you really like. And so we're going to trust you and believe you, and you better buy this. And so we're going to hype it up and try to squeeze all the money out of you we can over your nostalgia, right?
Yeah. It
Which,
worked with
but
System of Battle, right?
yeah, exactly. By the way, I don't think that's a bad idea. Like, sure, that's fine. You want it, you want it. Okay. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I would put these guys at like, I don't know, 4-1, whereas Malarian's elves feel like 2-1 to me, something like that, right? Okay.
I think one of the things that I really wonder if GW is doing with their lore writing at this point is, I think it was one of the things that was done like in the Harry Potter series.
Yeah, you just
There's
seed.
probably, yeah, you seed stuff all over the place, and you just mention all of these random things, and then you pull the threads together later that you want to, and you look like a genius that planned all of this stuff.
Yeah,
But if you look, there were so many throwaway things that were
right.
put in there that you ignored. Like it could just be that they could just be sprinkling stuff around to see what threads they're going to pull later.
I think that's exactly right, is the short answer to the question. Like, I think that's exactly what they're doing. Yes, I mean, like, Sigvald was teased with a single line and a couple mentions, from here and there, but like, that's just stuff you can write in and then come back to later, right? So you just make a little note of all that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. All right, let's go next.
Yeah.
Tyrion's elves. Yet again, we've had sort of a representative of Tyrion's forces show up. We have his like, this isn't, they're like both Eltharion to some degree, and then but also the Lyranor, the other one, whatever. The named guy on horse antelope, he's actually part of Tyrion's force, not Teclis's force. He's his like lieutenant or whatever. But Tyrion's elves, the other half of the elves, we know this is sitting out there. Yet again, this has been teased. This has been talked about in the narrative. This has been set up. Tyrion again goes all the way back to the beginning of, AOS 1.0. We got introduced to all the new gods, all the heroes of the last time around the cycle, right? All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again, kind of thing. And this feels an inevitability eventually, right? Like this is the Thanos snap of I am inevitable right here. But what is this? What do you think about Tyrion's elves?
I think them happening is about as close to 100% as we can reasonably get without actually having spies in GW.
Sure.
But I really wonder if they would actually be their own army or if they are just next wave of Lumineth.
Ah, there we go. And therein lies the rub, right? Is this just effectively a big expansion of the Lumineth? Let's call it an additional, let's say conservatively, 10 or 11 War Scrolls. Okay. Is this just 10 or 11 War Scrolls added to Lumineth? Because it uses the same core, right? So like Wardens and Sentinels and the Riders, Dawn Riders and so on, right? But then they have their tyrannic units instead of the Teclian units, right? That sort of solidifies it. The other, other elementary focuses and stuff. Or does this become its own force? I think you're right. I don't know if you were saying this or not, but my feeling is this isn't a Lumineth expansion. It's not its own force.
Yeah, I think maybe it would kind of ride the line and end up being sort of like the Orc War Clans book.
Sure. You could see it being somewhere between orcs and ogres, as you mentioned, right? You could see it kind of playing in that space.
Yeah, where it's like they can kind of be playing as their own force, or they can be played together, and it's all just in one book.
Yeah, that feels right. Especially because it feels like this army, like in my mind, talking about what I think this force looks like, this feels like it should be the sort of martial champions, the like highly skilled elves, not the tricksy magic we pull a bunch of dumb crap to win Teclis elves, but just like we're the best, most skilled warriors because we've had thousands of years to just hone our perfect little minds and practice and all of that kind of thing, right? And they're all just like these sort of martial champions, right?
Yeah.
That kind of feels the right take on it to me. That kind of thing. Chase said new Dragon Princes, Dragon Mages, Phoenix Guard, Lothar and Sea Guard, two wizards, a water monster, a new anointed on Phoenix. Yeah, I don't think they'd be that direct, Chase. I really don't. Like, just because they weren't that exact with the representation of the Teclian side. So I don't think they're going to go and look and say, okay, let's remake Dragon Princes. Will they make a heavy knight? Yeah, probably. That would make sense for Tyrion, right? Like, absolutely there's a heavy knight that's kind of filling the same thematic role as Dragon Princes. But they could just easily be like yak cavalrymen or something like that.
Yeah. And I think they did a really good job with that in Lumineth, where they made stuff that, like, it's clearly all calls back to High Elves. But it's still very much its own thing.
Yeah. Like, fundamentally, it's occupying almost a similar pseudo role, silhouette, something, right? Like Martin Orlando said, the River Temple unit is a successor to the Lothern Sea Guard. Yeah, like maybe they have like some new multi, purpose, because the Lothern Sea Guard was like they could both fight in melee and shoot, like that was part of their thing, right? So maybe they have a new multi-purpose unit that does both some ranged engagement and so on. Okay, got it. Then we're on the same page, Chase. I agree. So yeah, I think that they're often like echoing. They're playing the George Lucas, right? It's like poetry. It rhymes, right? Okay, cool, good. Yeah, but I think you're right. I don't think this is a whole new army. I think. Okay, here's the question: is this a 4.0 thing? What are your odds, you think, of seeing this in 4.0? Of seeing this expansion?
We're on what, our third Lumineth book already?
I mean, technically fourth, but sure.
Yeah, fourth Lumineth book in 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're getting more. This is coming in 4.0. For sure.
Okay.
I would put money on this happening in 4.0.
I could see this depending on like if we got Malarian, then I could see this at either the very end of the edition, like coming in hot at the end as like a sort of like light answer to the dark if that happened early, or I could see this being delayed and kicked into like 5th edition, right? But there we're talking about like it's wild to think about that, but that would mean like 2027 plus is what we're talking about there, which sounds a long way away, but it won't be, sadly. We all get older.
Yeah. Hard to believe we're already talking about the 4th edition of Age of Sigmar.
Tempest Fugit, my friend. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. New Stormcast Chamber, anyone?
Because, of course.
Okay. Legit question. Are we going to get a new Stormcast Chamber in 4.0?
So far, we're 3 for 3
Sure.
with new edition, new Stormcast Chamber.
Yeah, true. It's a true statement.
Plus, we had the Extremist Chamber in the middle of 1st edition.
Yep.
And wasn't there another release too in there somewhere? I think. I don't know.
Well,
There's so much Stormclass shit. I just can't even remember anymore.
Sure. There's a lot. I mean, yes, because you're also thinking of the Vanguard guys or whatever. So you've got like
Yeah, those
original.
guys.
You're thinking of Extremist. You're thinking of Vanguard. Then you've got Sacrosanct, and then you've got Thunderstrike. Okay, but anyways, go ahead.
So obviously they are just the central protagonist of all of Age of Sigmar. I feel like they have to have a major new release, basically with every new launch box for a new edition that comes out. I don't. It's like how many new edition releases have been there for 40K that didn't have Space Marines involved somehow?
Okay. Sure. It's rare. It's It's happened, but it's rare.
Yeah, I mean, 10 editions. I would think that they would have had to happen
Sure.
at some point.
It's happened.
But I guess the question is like, what do they even do at this point with Stormcast? I think that they're practically obligated to do it at this point. I don't even know where they go from here.
I mean, the
Like
answer
70
is
arsenals as it is.
the easy answer is tanks. Obviously, make Stormcast tanks, you cowards. Okay. Stop with this chariot nonsense and give us our Stormcast lightning tanks. But here's my honest answer. Okay, I'm gonna take the under on this one, which is I don't think we will get a new full Stormcast release in 4.0. I don't think it'll be in the launch box, and I don't think it we'll get like, will we get new Stormcast models in AOS 4.0? Yeah, sure, of course, because like they'll show up in a new hero with the book, or a new Underworld's Warband or a Warcry Warband or something. Like, of course, like they're not gonna not release models for their flagship faction. There's a statue of this guy out front, okay, of the build.
And really, at this point, when was the last time we got a book release that didn't have at least one new model that came out with it?
Exactly. So, like, yes, of course, there's going to be some new Stormcast, okay. And so I think that there will be like some new models, but I don't think we're going to really expand it. I mean, I tend to agree with Coach mentioned it like some point back. The challenge is that we're already pushing it on scrolls. Like, there are so many scrolls. So like they might add a couple more special units or a new hero or something like that, or a new unit that would just fit into Thunderstrike. Like they'll keep building on the Thunderstrike stuff for a while. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I could see all of that, but I just don't think we're going to really see um, like a major Stormcast expansion like we have in the previous editions, whatever that means. Okay, and my undercall is I don't think they'll be in the launch box. I really don't. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the launch box being Malarians, elves versus whoever the antagonist of the next season is going to be. Maybe Skaven.
Absolutely. Hades, you might be the only person who doesn't like Thunderstrike more than the original Fatcast. I just want you to know that. I respect your opinion. Aesthetics are deeply personal, but I take Thunderstrike guys over the original Fatcast every day. I love the Thunderstrike look. It brings closer to the
Your
original
opinion was
John
bad,
Blanche
and you
art.
can feel bad.
Yeah. Look, I mean, like what you like, as always, man. It's all good. Everybody had like aesthetic is a deeply personal thing. But like the original John Blanche art for Stormcast, where they were these like pretty thin cutting figures, really sharp. I thought that was fantastic, and I wish they had built on that more than the sort of fat dudes we ended up getting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's not me weight shaming though. I'm not saying they're overweight. I'm saying their armor cuts a too wide of a silhouette for my tastes. Okay. All right. Let's talk about army redesigns. Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're gonna pause in the middle, and we're gonna go for army redesigns. And let's start with our in my mind, and certainly the truth, with the army that needs a redesign more than any other army currently in AOS, and that is Skaven. Now you might ask yourself, Vince, why is this guy here? Why for Skaven did you pick this model? Why did you pick this Plague Lord Skrulk, or as you might know it, the current Plague Priest? Okay. And the answer is because this is still the current model for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this model was released in January. I'll be conservative. It released a little earlier in the UK, but the actual release date is marked as January of 1993. 20 years old, CW? You're 20 years old. I wish this was 20 years old, my dog. This is 30 years old. It turns 30. It turned 30 this year. 30-year-old
This model
skull.
could drink when Age of Sigmar started.
Yeah. Absolutely correct. Okay. So,
No, I will say, for its age,
sure.
that's still a really nice sculpt.
Skrulk is a nice model, yes. Now I will say the second oldest model. This, by the way, is the oldest model in Age of Sigmar, still in the normal books. The second oldest model is also a Skaven model, and that is the Poison Wind Globadier, that dude, who came out like 2 months later, so is also the same age, and also the same. That sculpt did not hold up as well, is what I'm trying to say. So yes, 1993. The real question is how many people who are watching this show right now are younger than this model. Okay? It's got to be a decent percentage. I've looked at the statistics on my channel, the analytics. Some of you are younger than this model. So, there we go. All right. Yes, the Scryer Acolyte now. That's the new name for the Wind Globadier. At any rate, look, it's not just that. Skaven are littered up and down with these models that are just like ancient. Just beyond ancient. Okay? And I love the mix right now in the chat of people saying I was younger or I bought that model in 93. That's great. That's great. Wonderful. I love it. I love it. So this really is just like, but this is just the most telling example. All up and down the line, you have things that haven't been redesigned for years, right? Even the new models in that range, quote, outside of what came in the end times, are basically 20 years old. A lot of them were like the 2004 wave, that period, 2004 to 2006. There was a pretty good wave of redesigns that happened there. These things tend to come in waves. And so like even a lot of the quote unquote newer plastics are from that time period. They're approaching 20 years. They'll celebrate 20 years by the time four launches. Some of them will. So to me, this is just the range. Like, this is it. Yeah, Giselles are ancient. I don't remember their exact release date, but yes, they're ancient. So, I mean, Paul, is there any force you would pick beyond Skaven to get a complete redesign?
I think they're the most likely to.
Okay.
They have such tremendous popularity. Like
Yep.
everybody loves Skaven.
Yep.
Even if you don't play Skaven, you love Skaven existing.
Yep.
I think they're an awesome army, awesome aesthetic. You don't see a lot of, humanoid rats in fantasy stuff. It's certainly around. I know it's like in D&D and various other things, but in terms of like the more like pop culture-y fantasy stuff, it's not really there much.
Yep.
So it has, I think, it has a lot of fairly unique character to what Warhammer is. And they have been very important in plot of Warhammer for a really long time.
Yep.
Like whenever they need a plot device, whenever they need a MacGuffin to make a thing happen, oh, here comes Skaven. They're gonna burrow a hole into the bottom of an ocean and drain
Sure.
it. Like it. Whenever you need a random thing happen, the Skaven are there.
Yep.
And I don't know, like they're also, I think, some very necessary comic relief to the setting. If we didn't have stuff like Skaven and Gits and Orcs and I guess from my perspective Nurgle, but like because Nurglings are hilarious and beasts are hilarious.
Sure.
But without those few things, like this is a really dark, depressing setting, but they add a little bit of levity to it.
Sure. Sure.
And it adds some levity to the gameplay. It goes into like a niche of psychographic profiles that are a little bit underserved, I think, in Warhammer. Like there's not a lot of risk, like taking big risks for a reward.
I understand what you mean. Yeah.
Like there's very few things where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go for an extra buff on this, but it might die.
Right.
Like the only army that does that.
They have such a uniquely defined, clear, obvious, fun play style, right? And there's a group of people, as you mentioned, that like me, for example, but many others do, where that just hits. It just hits perfectly right in the center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the way, the answer to the question is when did Giselles release? The answer there was April 2002. Went ahead and looked it up real quick. April 2002. So congratulations, Giselles. You can also now legally drink. How much of the Skaven range can legally buy alcohol is shocking. Shocking. So let me just say
They're buying rounds for all the Stormcast.
Yeah, no joke. Babies by comparison. Okay. All right. So Skaven, to me, I agree. This feels like the odds-on favorite for the redesign. And moreover, I've put my money down on this before. I'll put it down again. This is my 4th edition launch box army. I think Skaven are the one. We've cycled through a lot of chaos crap. Like we went chaos. Whatever. We went chaos, death, destruction. It's time to get back to chaos. We've done a lot of other chaos stuff. It's time to get into the Skaven. That's it. Okay. Army
But
number two.
what's
Oh,
the
good.
plot? If you're making the call, what is the plot point you think that they are going to be involved in to get them to be like the launch box thing?
Uh, being in Ulgu, and it'll be an Eshin led thing. Like they'll lead with the Eshin redesign first, since that's a lot of the oldest kits. Like the Gutter Runners, by the way, were like a month after that. They're like May 2002. So
Yeah.
those
That's a
are
good
also
call.
a
I
similar
like that.
ancient sculpt. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of reason to have Eshin there, mixing it up in in Ulgu, stuff like that, in the realm of shadows. So yeah, I think that's you lead with that. Ninja rats are cool, super great launch box. Then you kick out the rest of the stuff for the range. Jobs are good. Um, I really hope they push it. Like I want to see new stuff from every clan. I really do. And by the way, they can bin a bunch of old scrolls. I'm fine with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's cool. We can trim the range. I have everything painted. I've lost stuff out of Skaven before. I've lost entire armies before. I want playable solid armies. I don't care if I lose a unit or two I've painted. Oh no, that's life. I've gotten it's like I've gotten my money's worth. you know?
Yeah.
So we're good.
Really,
We're good.
if you painted them and enjoyed painting them and then put them on the shelf, and for a lot of people, that's getting your money's worth.
Yeah,
As
you're
well.
valid right there. But I mean, well, you're absolutely right, and I completely agree with that. But I've obviously gone well beyond that.
Yeah.
So just hundreds of games and countless hours. So yeah, I'm good. Okay. All right. Next up, the other army that could also be due for a redesign: Beasts of Chaos, BOC. Paul, I want you to take the lead on this one, because I think you probably have a bigger passion on this than me. What would you see this redesign as if this was going to happen?
Um, Number one, there are so many old derpy sculpts in that army.
Yep.
The Gore, the Ungore Raiders, like they're bad. Like they're in the same kind of vein of derpiness as like the Chaos Marauders. Um, and you have like the uh, Dragon Ogres and the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth that are like those are
Oh boy.
real old models. Aren't those all metal too?
Well, the I think the Shaggoth actually comes in Finecast now, but that's no better. Like all the all the Shaggoths I have are metal, because I always pick up the metal ones if I can find them.
Yeah.
A couple years back at AdeptCon, they were selling at like the Bits guy. They were selling the metal Shaggoth for $20 a piece, and they had like three of them. I was like, well, I'm a buyer.
Okay. Yeah. Um, if you just go through like the whole range, there's not a lot of sculpts that really still look that good from the old stuff. And they've explored pretty well into like the new Zangor look awesome.
Sure,
The new Slongor, those are really nice despite having terrible war scrolls.
sure.
Um,
But like look wise, exceptionally cool models.
awesome models, great. Um, so I think what would actually be really cool is to dig more into what they've already had success with. Give us our Pestigore back, give us our Cornigore back. I think the Bestigore that they currently have, like those models are pretty decent. I think they've held up pretty well. But so much of the rest of the range is just like you need new stuff. Like it does not look like it fits with the AOS aesthetic anymore.
The Dragon
Like,
Ogres, by the way, 2013.
yeah,
So 10 years old. Not crazy.
not too crazy, but like Cockatrace,
Oh sure,
Caberslide,
sure. Oh
right?
god, yes.
All
Yeah,
the stupid monsters. Like, get them out of here, guys.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you can do better.
There's
And
so much room in this range for redesign. I completely agree. Like I think the best gore hold up the best of all of them, which is, I suppose, either ironic or not ironic. I don't know. But either way, they're still nice sculpts. They could be a lot better, a lot better. But like I agree with you on the gore, the ungore. A lot of this stuff just really shows its age.
what really disappoints the hell out of me is I recently picked up some of the old metal Pestigore, because of course I did because it's Nurgle stuff,
Yeah, sure.
and uh, like those are great models. Like obviously they're not quite up to like Age of Sigmar current standards.
Of course.
Like they're so much better than stuff in the current Beast of Chaos range. So much better.
Yeah, I mean, like, I tend to agree that that's the avenue that is at least a rich vein to explore, because we've already done it with two of them. That is to say, we have our Slongor um and our Zangor, and there's a unit that doubles up in multiple armies, right? I mean, we obviously that exists in two armies, so like again, hence why I say it wouldn't be that weird for Malarians elves to have the same thing where you've got like here's these troops here and these other troops here, like you could in cities and in Malarians elves. Like if Chaos can do it, Order can do it too. There's plenty of precedent for it. Um, when we've seen them take a crack at new beastmen in things like Underworld's warbands and stuff, or whatever, like the ancillary products is what I should say. They look great. They do a really good job with them, and so I think some mix between like redesigning the monsters so they're really up to scale, up to snuff, and just up to par really with the current way that like monsters look. I think it's a huge part of it because the monsters of chaos being in beast is such a big deal, and a bunch of their monsters are just underwhelming goofballs. And that's just not cool. These things are supposed to be the like some really terrifying chaos monsters rampaging the countryside, and you look at these guys and you're like, sure, you're scary, you know.
Yeah.
Between that, a focus on expansion into the like as you said, Pestigore and Cornagore, right, and redesigns of the core gore, right, the core gore. In other words, Goron, Goran, and Vestgor. I think you'd have just a really, really tight range. Um, this is one I'd love to see. Uh, you know, nearly a bottom up redesign on. I think there's a couple things that could carry over, but for the most part, we're talking about binning pretty much this whole range and building it from the ground up. Um, yeah.
Now, the question is, how far back do we go? Pull in some interesting ideas. We bring back the ostrich beastmen.
Oh sure, yeah. You go back to like the late '80s, early '90s when you had the real wackadoo animal infused beastmen. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, those were fun.
Mm-hmm. I
They're
mean, they
cool.
obviously found an aesthetic they locked into a little tighter since that
Yeah.
time. But here's what I'll say: I wouldn't be opposed to having some, especially if you did them as potentially pseudo elite units of like some more AOS infused beast creatures. So like not just
Mhm.
sort of like take an animal and slam it together with a person, right? But like take an AOS creature and humanize it in some way. I think could be a thing to explore.
Mhm.
Just like really out there weird stuff. I think could be fun. Absolutely. There's a lot of weird animals, as it were, like traditional sort of beasts in the AOS world. So, yeah. Now, I think the Skaven one is a lock for 4.0. Personal feeling. I believe this in my soul because I have to. It is the deepest of copium. Do you think this is the kind of thing we would get both Skaven and Beastmen in the same edition?
Um, I don't know if we would get a total full redesign of both.
Okay.
Um, could we get, say, a a major redesign of one of them and get a smallish release updating sculpts for the other one? Yes, I think we could do that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that'd almost be a shame, like depending on what was kept and what was jettisoned, right? Again, like if we had to keep Vestigores, I don't know that I'd fight it too hard. So like there's some things that are negotiables in the range. Like all Vizine stuff should obviously stay, of course. And but like, there's I that could very easily become underwhelming, is what I'll say. But I think you're right. I think the two full redesigns feels very unlikely to me. So either we get like a partial workup of these guys in 4.0, or they just gotta wait their turn. They gotta wait till till 5.0. So you're talking like 2028. They finally get their due, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. Okay, cool. All right. Long shots. See how many people get this particular slide. But all right, let's talk about the long shots. These are things that could be new armies, but it's a little more out there. Okay. All right. Long shots. Combined Duerden. One of the, like you mentioned, Paul, having too many different armies. We mentioned the failure of Fire Slayers. We've talked about this over and over again. It keeps not happening, but it could. Tomorrow's always a new day, right? The turkey wakes up happy and fed every day except one day. So is this the addition? I've put in this cool golem here because I think if they ever did this, I want cool dwarven golems. But is this a thing that happens in 4.0? Do we get combined Duerden?
I could see it not as a battle tome, right? I could see it in some sort of narrative supplement, maybe like we had with Broken Realms, where you get it like towards the end of an edition, like we had Legion of the First Prince. It was this other quasi army that's off to the side, pulling stuff in from other armies. I could see them doing that. You come up with a decent plot reason to do it, and there it is. I don't think they're going to merge those into one book. Despite how happy the Fire Slayer situation is, I could see an expansion of KO. Like, they could definitely have some cool room to expand.
Yeah.
Like, I want my KO mechs. I want them to have little little dreadnought suits.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. Combined Duerden's been this kind of thing that's been floating around, and my honest answer is I put it in here just to say I don't think it's going to happen. I put this one at like 50-1. Okay.
I'd put it lower.
Yeah, this is I just think I think we'd see a Fire Slayer expansion before we'd see this. Like, they double down, and that's throwing good money after bad, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Okay. But I still think that would be more likely than this, which is a shame because I really want some sweet golems. How do we not have cool golems in this world? It's really upsetting to me. Really? Like, it's such a easy idea and concept to have cool mech suit golem things. You can have people in them or not. I don't care.
We have a whole realm of metal.
Yeah.
Like,
right. Exactly.
We have Scandinavia, the realm.
Yeah.
Like, how do we not have this yet?
It's mystifying, truly. So yeah, I mean, odds for this one are very far out for me. I think realistically, the more likely thing here would be they keep on the train we're on. We see some kind of expansion for Fire Slayers whenever their book comes out. Like, they get 3 new kits or whatever, right? And that's their answer. Like, do you like them now? Did that work? Right? I don't know.
I don't know if they'll even get that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right, next long shot. Goblin Sky Pirates. I was about to say Spy Pirates, but no, Sky Pirates. It's a fun tongue twister. Okay, I used the very old art here, but obviously these guys have been mentioned. The Grotbag Scuttlers and so on and so forth, or whatever they're called. They've been talked about in the lore. We know that there's goblins who have flying ships and stuff like that. The more things we give boats and the ability to fly around in some way, the more my dream of Battletoad Gothic becomes an inevitability. So, what do you think about these guys as a long shot?
You know, I think obviously Gitz is a popular faction.
Hmm.
Um, they do have some older sculpts that they could jettison. And really, I think the whole like Spider Fang group like doesn't get a lot of love as it currently is. Personally, I don't like the sculpts. I'm sure some people do. Um, I could see that easily
Paul from the
going like
Mortal Realms is going to come in here and just start throwing haymakers, but continue.
you can hash it out. It'll be fine. I think it would be fine if they dropped that and they were like, okay, we're going to have a new sub faction of Sky Pirates that are going to go along with that instead. Um, which I think is way more in the AOS narrative and aesthetic than guys that are all about spiders.
Hmm.
Um, and we've had the um, Gur season, and before that we had the Gyran season, and we didn't get new spider stuff, which those would be the two places that I would have put spider stuff. So if we're not getting it there, where are we going to get more spider stuff? I think it would just go away, and you know, Sky Pirates. You know, Goblin Pirates sound like they could float along in the shadows. They could be tackling sea shanties. It'd be great. I could see them in 4.0. They could do something.
Sure. So let me ask you. I have questions here. Okay. Because first of
Okay.
all, I think we can both agree that this idea is money, and I
It's
tend to
awesome.
agree. I tend to agree with you that the spiders are sort of an appendix that could be excised. I know there are lovers of the spider stuff in Gits, but it is the appendix portion of that book. Like it could be excised and the body would still function. Like
Yeah.
it's
People are allowed to be wrong. It's fine.
yeah, it's goblins, trolls, and squigs. Like we know that's the big three. We all know it. Okay. So, but, but, question the first. Let's put our money hats back on. Okay. How much of a failure is it for Age of Sigmar in general that this doesn't exist? What I mean by that is, doesn't this just sell like gangbusters if you make something like this? Like, doesn't this become like some of the biggest selling kits of the year if they sculpt this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's I don't know. The way I would just describe the setting of Age of Sigmar in general is like it's beyond high fantasy,
Right.
right?
Yep.
It is somewhere. It's like when high fantasy gets high.
It's
That's
epic.
Age of
It's
Sigmar.
epic mythic fantasy. Yes.
Whatever fancy words you want to put on it.
Sure.
It is high fantasy enjoying some substances. It is above and beyond. Um, and what screams above and beyond high fantasy than a bunch of whacked out goblins in flying ships?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, give me that.
Yeah. 100%. You know, look, you got and so many other fantasy games explore this kind of space. Like the thing that's ultimately the failure of Warhammer to me, what kills me is we're in this epic, mythic, ridiculous fantasy of Age of Sigmar, which I love the base world. Okay, like it's so great, it's so wonderful, it's so varied and cool and different. And then the occupants of that world are like the most rote, basic fantasy tropes.
Yep.
Okay, and I look at something like what D&D has done over the past 20 years or what Magic the Gathering has done over the past 20 years or Numenera from Monty Cook or like we could go down a ton of different titles, right? Where fantasy has been pushed into all these really exciting, interesting, different directions. And like how are we not doing that? How are like is it just a failure of imagination? What's the issue here? I would love to be wherever the planning is, wherever the thoughts on this are, because I would be in there like, what's the next insane, crazy thing we're doing that's going to blow people away and really sell our world, okay, as being something distinct. That would be like differentiators and differentiating concepts would be my complete focus. And I just feel like we've left ideas like this completely on the shelf. Like we mention them in the lore because it's free, and then we never bother to put them out. And it just feels like we're not exploring, we're not using the space. Move, spread out. Really use the space. Like you have all of this crazy stuff that could be there, and we're not doing any of it. And like this feels like Sporadicus said risk aversion. Yeah, maybe, but this is not risky. Like Gits are a hugely popular army. You sell a ton of them. I have to believe, just like based on how many people I see own Gits anytime I go anywhere, right?
I would love for them to just release some sales numbers on like by faction or by not even by kit, but just like what are the top selling armies?
Like most popular, yeah, sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Like is it the boring Lumineth crap? Like Lumineth are cool. Like I understand why people like it, and they're like for GW, Lumineth is printing money because there's so many people that love high elves unconditionally. And it was like, okay, reimagine high elves, here you go, and just start the money machine.
Sure.
But I mean, so many of us just love weird stuff, and that's why we're here.
100%. Like it just this kind of an idea, and maybe people have other versions of this thing, but to me, like that, like a weird idea like this. But again, to me, this just feels like when I was Googling around for the images for this, and I knew this piece of art was what I was looking for because I love this old classic piece of art. But like if you just put Goblin Sky Pirate into Google, you get like a million images from different games. Card games and board games and everything where it's just like everything you can imagine of Goblin Sky Pirates and flying boats and everything else you can picture, right? How is every other game beating GW to the punch here? Right? Yeah. So, this just feels to me like such a slam dunk. And let me tell you, I don't think we'll see it. Now, if we did, let me make an argument for you. You ready? Here's where I'm gonna diverge. This should be its own army. This shouldn't be part of Gits. Okay? I would love to see this actually stand alone. Like, develop this range. I would love to see a group of goblins that are off on their own. They've taken over a skyport or whatever. And they've developed their own stuff. And, like, give them a completely new story. Divorce them from the ground Gits completely. Okay? And the reason I'm saying that is because I think there'd just be a lot more creative space to do really interesting things with the Force if you did it as a complete standalone, right? As opposed to try to shoving them into the previous book. Make them their own separate destruction force. And by the way, when could you do them? Do I think these will come in 4.0? No. When could you do these? Here's my argument. We're gonna get to Shimon eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where all the ships sail in the sky. So there. Go there. Like whenever we get to Shimon, this better be an army. If that's 5.0 or whatever. So there you go. Okay.
I wonder, and now that I'm thinking about this a little bit, I wonder if they're concerned about bringing too much like levity into the setting, if they're trying to keep it having a certain level of seriousness. It's hard to go goblins without it getting silly.
Sure. No, I don't disagree. I mean, like, okay. Cool. Yeah. Remember when Warhammer was like about fun things? I mean, Pepperidge Farm remembers. Like, let's, this isn't a serious thing. Okay?
Yeah.
like this isn't Game of Thrones. Let's not pretend. And Game of Thrones is fantasy for babies anyways, and it's boring. So, like, let's actually capitalize on our strength here, which is the strength of Warhammer, as I said at the beginning of this or a while back, is spike skulls and hats. Spike skulls and funny hats, right? That's it.
It needs to be a new T-shirt for the merch
Yeah,
store.
absolutely. I'm gonna move I'm moving my merch store over soon to a new producer. I'll see what I can do for a spike skulls and funny hats shirt. Okay. All right. I'm just waiting on a new piece of art that I'm getting commissioned before I move everything over. So, at any rate, uh, long odds, but man, should this happen? I think we both agree on that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Like again, this feels like such a money machine to me. All right. Here's one. Incarnates and elementals. Okay. Now, let me see if I can back this up a little bit. I feel like we've got more justification for this than we might have at some point in the past, simply because we printed this thing called the Incarnate and everybody hated it. But everybody hated it because it was a overpowered piece that could be used by any army and was just ridiculous and basically exactly what I said was going to go wrong with it forever ago did. Okay.
Anytime you have anything that can be put in multiple armies, every army you add seems to just exponentially increase your risk of bad interactions.
Mm-hmm. We know this kind of stuff exists in the lore, obviously. Duh. I mean, they made an incarnate model, right? But these are representations, not really. Like I have here a picture of pretty classic elementals, like D&D elementals, but that's not really appropriate to Age of Sigmar. This would be like representations of the realm stone, the elementals of the realm stone, right? Because that's the elements of the mortal realms. In the same way that like the Gur elemental was a dude. These do have a pedigree. Remember the old Forge World incarnate of fire and incarnate of beasts or whatever, right? So like there is a history here. And I think that this is like an actual really interesting idea where they could take classic elemental concepts. So Manzak is in the chat, and he's obviously working on his. I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff. He's an incredible sculptor, and he's working on a bunch of like sort of genie themed stuff. Okay, like a genie themed army, and that's traditionally aligned with like air elemental stuff or fire elemental stuff, right? That kind of thing. And I think there's sort of the same opportunity here to take the classic concept of elementals and what they represent, right? Which is just condensed down sentient beings made of like the core elements of the universe, and imprint that idea onto the mortal realms where you have like death sand, Shaishan elementals, and bestial elementals and Akshian elementals and stuff like that, right? And you have, I don't know, like rogue wizards at the head of it who have press ganged these things into service, sort of like martial bounty hunter, wizards who are out and about, like and focus on controlling the essences of the realms. These guys could fit into this guy's could be a completely new take on a destruction type army. I think it'd be really different and interesting than any of the previous destruction armies we had. So like I feel like this is an idea that they could take and make their own in a really unique way, right? Like, what does the Shaishan Grave Elemental look like? I don't know, but I bet it's pretty cool, right? That kind of thing. It feels like there's a lot of potential to explore there and let the sculptors go nuts. But I don't know. What do you think about this? This is sort of the most out there concept. This admittedly lives more or less in my head.
Yeah, I don't know how you turn it into an army. I think it's it could be another new round of generic endless spells. That could be a good place to go with it.
Could be like a Regiment of
Um,
Renown type of thing very easily, right? That could
yeah,
be a thing. You got like the Rogue Wizard and his elemental boys and stuff like that. Sure, you could do that kind of a thing.
yeah. I just am having trouble seeing how you make it an army. I
Mm,
could see these things coming out and being, like we had the Incarnative Gur, we have the Endless Spells. I could see various different things popping up in individual armies, like character harnessed some essence of something and brought it in. Like that could easily be a thing like in one of the Death Armies that like
sure.
Nagash just like harnessed like the spirit of Jaish and has it represented on the battlefield somehow. Um, yeah,
I get that. I
number
get
one is
that.
yeah. The challenge I think is make it an army, and number two, like making it coherent because it's like inherently all over the place.
Sure. Yeah. I think those are both fair pushbacks. I think the first one I could answer because I do think you could like when you think about sort of all the different realms, the different types of elementals you could sort of create out of those things and press them into troops and stuff like that. And by the way, we do know these things can become sentient on their own, like endless spells and these kind of elementals. It's not like lack of intelligence is an issue. They could be operating completely on their own because back in we talked about what was it in Malign Sorcery or whichever one it was, the sentient purple sun, right? So like we know these types of things can gain intelligence. So I think you could cut that line pretty easy. Like I could, if you gave me a couple days, I could probably sketch out like a concept of an army silhouette and what it looks like and what the troops would be and stuff like that. I think your second point though is quite reasonable. That does land as the biggest challenge to me, which is this would feel pretty strange as an army. Like it's not unlike basically every other army. It doesn't have a sort of coherent silhouette, right? Like its shapes and species and forms are just kind of all over the shop, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be a mix of a lot of different things. Now, I think if you had a great sculptor working with a great concept artist, you could probably create like a unifying aesthetic, right? Like the armor that they're all pressed into or something like that. Like there's ways you could sort of split the diff to get
Mhm.
there. But I agree that is the major challenge. I think you've properly identified the big problem. Yeah, and they are really a big fan, and I don't think they're crazy for being so, but they are really a big fan of like consistency in the aesthetic of the armies they put out, which is quite reasonable, right? A lot of other games aren't, and their armies end up looking like just a bunch of nonsense thrown together. So I get that. It's fair. Okay. All right. Okay. So what else? What did we miss? What was the what Paul? Any other items, long shot or otherwise, or you in the chat? We're gonna keep the show short by the way because I have to be up incredibly early to get on a plane tomorrow morning. But
I have to get up early for work tomorrow too, so I
yes,
don't mind that.
but what didn't we cover here? So audience, if you've got any final ideas you want us to pitch about, Paul, anything else on your list?
Um, I think the big thing for me is looking at kind of like the overall sort of balance of the game and factions that exist. It's our largest Grand Alliance is Order, and that's like 9 factions, I think. And Chaos is 7, and then Death and Destruction are both 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we're gonna get new stuff, if it's not in Death and Destruction, it's going to continue to just kind of tilt the whole game in a way that it's like, why do we have 4 grand alliances if 3/4 of the game is 2 of them?
Right.
Um, so, could we explore a death faction that is not loyal to Nagash?
Yeah, I'd love to see that. There's a couple ways you could go with that. Like you could have a sort of, um, a monstrous, like a, how do I want to say this? Like a Frankensteinian faction, sort of what they did with the Underworld's warband, but like kind of blow
Mhm.
that concept way out and make them not loyal to Nagash. Like there's no souls there to be had. It's just automated
Yeah.
constructs. Hence, Nagash has no, uh, it's just meat, as it were. I think that could be a way to go. Um, there's some people in the army who said, or people in the army, people in the chat, silent people. I mean, they're supposed to be dead, but who knows? Lots of things are supposed to be dead, so whatever. Bug people are bug people. I could see a bug people faction destruction, sure. Like, it'd be fine. I really need to see, like, how good it looks, because I don't think they want to make something that in any way could be confused with Tyranids. That would be the problem. And I think they'd want to work hard to make it feel completely its own thing. Um, so uh, I mean, uh, when it comes to like people mention vampirates, look, I'd love to see it. I'm all for it. I still think it should be an expansion to Soulblight Gravelords. Like, bring out vampirates, you cowards. Do it. But I think those are kind of the other ideas that are in the zeitgeist. And I
Mhm.
think those all make sense. Like, any of those could be a thing if they wanted. Bug people, if done correctly and very differently, like maybe more Thrycreen than Tyranid, if you know what a Thrycreen looks like. Basically a mantis type person. Um, so like more humanoid, more insectoid like that. Think clicky clacky praying mantis type of character, right? I think that would be fine.
For
Uh,
death, there's a lot of real life um, religion and all of those sorts of things, myth that um, that you can pull in as inspiration for things that are undead, and for I guess like Western sort of audiences, a lot of it would seem incredibly original because you've just never heard of it before. It just comes out of a culture that you don't know much about. Um, so that's certainly a good place that they could pull things from too. There's just stuff all over the world.
yeah, agreed.
Um, and and you know, people love Tomb Kings.
This is a true statement.
And if I'm remembering my lore correctly, didn't Cetra just go into the realm of chaos and was like, I'm going to go take these guys on myself?
Yeah,
Isn't
correct.
that how he went down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the last we ever heard of him. Yes,
And Gotrek did that, and he came back.
sure.
You know?
I mean, they're gonna get their whole relaunch for Old World. I think
Yeah.
anything they're touching in Old World becomes pretty instantly not going to happen in AOS. Is my feeling. That's my only
I
issue
know.
there.
If they could do that, it could work. I think it could work.
Oh,
It's
it could
just
work, but I think
another
they're competing studios.
hmm, maybe.
You know.
It, if it worked out, it's just another game system to sell the same models to. It's
Sure.
broadening the same audience for a product that already exists. So I don't know.
Uh,
It,
I
it,
I agree.
plot makes perfect sense.
Sure. Sure. All right. Good stuff. Well, look, we want to know what you think. So put them down in the comments. Drop them down there. Hit like, hit subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Paul, thank you so much, buddy. This is a lot of fun as we sat here and ruminated. And hopefully we're catching them at the right time. They designed their armies like 2-3 years out. So we're hopefully getting them. Maybe we could get into the end of 4th edition or middle of 4th edition, or maybe we planted some ideas in their heads for the launch of 5th edition. Like it's gotta live in the future. Okay. So
Petra comes back and challenges Nagash's throne. There you go.
I'm all
Plot.
for it.
Go.
I mean, I know who I'm backing in that fight, for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
very
It's not the
good.
guy with the hat.
No, no, no. It's the guy with much. It's the much cooler dude. All right. Hey everyone, hit like, hit subscribe, click all the buttons, do all the fun things that make all the fun dings. We really appreciate it. I'm sure Tom or Tyler or somebody will be back next week, but a special shout out to Paul, who jumped in like an absolute hero. Thank you, buddy, for co-hosting with me tonight. Check out Radio Free Hammer Hall. That's Paul's channel. But all of you out there, what's that?
I occasionally put out new videos.
You occasionally put out new. Hey, that's fine. I'm subbed. I watch all your new videos. It's always great when I see a Paul video pop up in my feed. For all of you out there, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Don't forget, drop in the comments what your army idea is. What didn't we mention? What do you like? What do you hate? What do you see? What do you not want to see coming in 4.0? All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. As always, we'll see you next Wednesday.